All right, on this segment of the show, we're going to just talk about the news that's been going on recently in sports over the last couple days. We're going to start it out with the big one. It came as a surprise. I knew there was some turmoil going on, but Doug Pederson being fired from the Eagles, I really did not see that coming.
Yeah, that came in yesterday on Monday. It sounded like I thought we were past the point where they would have fired him, but then it just kind of came out of not necessarily nowhere because we do know there was a lot of issues going on with the Eagles. They just had a really awful season, quite honestly. They went 4-11-1, and then also they've just kind of blundered what was an incredible roster that ended up winning the Super Bowl just a few years ago. And I never would have guessed after that Super Bowl that Doug Pederson would be gone just a few years later. And now there's been some rumblings that like maybe their GM will be gone, Howie Roseman, but I think that also probably would have happened by now. So I think he'll end up staying, but I would certainly think he's on the hot seat.
Do you think this was a decision that was based around basically the ownership making a decision between Carson Wentz and Doug Pederson? Like, do you think that Carson Wentz is going to be the starting quarterback next year, or do you think they're kind of just trying to start over?
That's certainly a possibility. The whole Wentz situation is very weird because I personally would stick with Hurts. I would try to get rid of Carson Wentz, but I'm a little less sure about that now. And if I were making the decision, I would be a little less sure now that Peterson is gone because I don't think Peterson is like a bad coach or anything. And I certainly, in this feud, if you can trade Carson Wentz, if you think you can trade Carson Wentz in the offseason, would have kept Peterson and maybe give it another year or so with Peterson and Roseman. But I think the final nail in the coffin maybe for this was the whole situation with him throwing the game in the finale of the regular season. I mean, I don't know if that was like predetermined by them, but it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere, especially for just the entire NFL fan base, people that follow the NFL. And it was a really bad look, I would say, even if it was predetermined by the Eagles staff.
Well, the report I saw that was really weird was Doug Peterson is sick of being told what to do. Does that mean Doug Peterson wanted to throw the game and the organization was saying, no, don't do that? But I think the organization would be I don't think there's any way that he'd be able to go in there and not throw the game if the organization wanted him to. So I think the organization wanted him to throw that game. He didn't want to. I think he was upset that he had to do it. But back to the Wentz thing, I don't think the Eagles can get rid of him. I don't think they're even the Falcons are going to probably try to end up getting rid of Matt Ryan this season. I don't see how, if you put their contracts together side by side, I'm taking Matt Ryan 100%.
Yeah.
And how many teams are even in a situation where they can take on that contract? I don't see how the Eagles are going to get rid of him. And I think what happened was the Eagles know they had to have Wentz on the team next year. And Doug Peterson just wasn't going to have it. Maybe he wanted to even cut him. I think that's honestly what ended up boiling down to were those two things. The fact that he had to tank the game, whether that was his decision or the organization's, and the fact that Wentz just wasn't the guy anymore.
Yeah. Just to real quickly add on to what you said, I think there is a lot of QBs floating around this season, and there's going to be teams that have clear openings, but Wentz would not be the guy I pursued if I was the Colts, for example, who've been tied to him.
100%. So next on the news, we have the COVID situation right now in the NBA. They opted to not do a bubble this year. One interesting thing they also did was they only scheduled a part of the season from the beginning, so we don't even know what the latter half of the season is even going to look like.
Yeah.
What are you thinking right now on this COVID situation?
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I think it just kind of shows that we're not like out of this yet. Like this is still a very real part of sports and a part of the NBA. It's certainly not good news, especially when we got the follow-up report that a bunch of these players that had tested positive a second time. I think it would take a lot more for them to consider pausing the season. Maybe they are considering it, but maybe it would take a lot more for them to actually take that step of pausing the season.
Yeah, I believe there is supposed to be a meeting very, very soon with the Board of Governors, and they're going to just try to sort all this out. Right now, there's reports that at least 5 players have tested positive multiple times in a row. Not a lot of names have been given out. We know Seth Curry tested positive, which was a big name, obviously. We have 6 games that have already been postponed with no reschedules set for it at all. I'm starting to get scared that the COVID is going to just mess up the NBA season altogether if they're not in a bubble. There's just so many games to get played, so much traveling done. I know with the NFL, they were super, super good with it. Just like in the buildings, there was so much information being given to the NFL about how it was all going to work. I don't know if the NBA has been this specific with all the details.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, it's already starting to get scary. No reschedules planned. I mean, when is the NBA season going to end? If we have all these reschedules, we're going to have a play-in tournament, both conferences. I really, really hope this doesn't just end the NBA season.
Yeah. All right, next we're going into some baseball. One of the big things that happened this week was Liam Hendriks signed with the White Sox on a 3-year, $54 million contract, and the White Sox are building a pretty good squad. They took a huge step forward last year, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, and getting who would be known as the best closer in baseball right now on that deal it's another step in the right direction for the White Sox. And I think it also shows the faith the White Sox have in him, because Hendricks has bounced around from AAA to the majors multiple times in his career. He's shown some inconsistency, but I think last season was just such an example of how great he is that the White Sox were willing to take that step and give him that big contract.
All right, and then also we got some news that we talked about last week on the show with Nate Watt, our guest, MLB expert. Tomoyuki Sugino failed to sign with an MLB team before his deadline on Thursday, and so he'll be returning to Japan to play another year there, but he has a chance to sign with an MLB team next year, and it should be easier for him next year too.
Yeah, the reason it's going to be easier is because the teams aren't going to have to pay a posting fee for him. I look at it next year that the same teams are probably going to be in the running again, the Blue Jays, Red Sox, and the Giants, with the Mets possibly being in the running. There was reports that they were in the running for him, but they dropped out pretty early on. I'm very curious to see if they end up trying to make a run at him, because it seems like the Mets are trying to bolster up that team, and maybe even getting him next year ends up helping towards the goal of a World Series.
Yeah, and now back to the NFL. We have some news that kind of came as a result of 2 veteran quarterbacks being eliminated from the playoffs in the wild card round. Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger, it seems like both of them are considering retirement. More so Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers seemed pretty emotional after the game. If I were to guess, I would think he retires. I'm a little more unsure about Big Ben. But the thing about if Big Ben retires, the Steelers would probably have to go and get a quarterback for next season, because I don't think they have the answer on their roster right now.
Absolutely not. It's going to be really, really sad to see Phillip Rivers go. I truly do believe this was his last season. I think there's a reason he signed a 1-year deal. And the saddest part about it all is he played a great game. And it sucks that's what he's going to end on, but at the same time, going out, obviously not on top, but after a great game where he kept his team in a playoff game against a much more talented team, it's not a terrible way to end out. Phillip Rivers, he's just been a great quarterback. I mean, he hasn't had too much playoff success, but he's a kind of a fan favorite. He talks a lot of trash to the defense without cussing,
yeah,
which is always super interesting. Played a great season with the Colts this year. He's just overall a really cool guy. I mean, another reason he's a fan favorite is he has so many kids. Like, everybody just likes to joke about it. It's going to be really, really sad to see Phillip Rivers go. On to Big Ben, obviously a little more unsure. Hasn't necessarily been reports that are saying that he's definitely going to retire. But yeah, like you said, there's no replacement for him.
Yeah, nothing on the roster. To say one more thing about Phillip Rivers, I think if he retires, it actually creates a really interesting situation for the Colts, because I think they still have a lot of cap room if they want to go out and get a QB not in the draft. And I think they're ready to take that next step forward, because they have a lot of pieces on that roster. And I was kind of confused why they signed Rivers in the offseason last offseason. So I think the potential hole at quarterback creates some really interesting possibilities for them.
So back to Big Ben, it's just I don't want that to be his last game. I know he had 500 yards and attempted 68 passes, But that was just it. The Steelers really had it. They could have won that game. It just started off so terrible, and it just felt like the world was just collapsing on them. That there was really no chance for them to come back. I would like to see Big Ben try to make another run at it, but like how emotional he was after the game is kind of making me lean towards the fact that he's going to retire. He just didn't look like the same Big Ben this season that we've known in the past. And towards the end of the season, you could see his age. You just see it was just taking a wear and tear on him that it hadn't in previous years. And I really do see Big Ben retiring this offseason personally. And I mean, it's probably going to see a legend go.
Yeah. So for the last news for this segment, this actually came out tonight on Tuesday, a little bit before we started recording. James Harden made a comment talking about how his relationship with the Houston Rockets is beyond repair. We knew it was very possible he was going to be traded this season. We kind of talked about it last week on the show, just when we were kind of talking about the Rockets. But this really signals that like he wants out, and he wants out now. He's not messing around. John Wall also responded, said he seemed pretty frustrated, talking about how it was early in the season, and Harden's already kind of given up. But
yeah, the thing about Harden is I don't know who's going to trade for him, because he seems to have a very specific list of teams that he wants to go to. The 76ers are not getting rid of Ben Simmons for him. I don't see that happening. They're playing too good right now. The Nets, I don't see why the Nets are gonna. Who are they gonna give up for him? Like they're gonna want. Yeah. You're not giving up Kyrie or KD. I don't exactly know what that trade package looks like. I don't know that the Nets even want to run that experiment. Maybe they do, but isn't it really weird to you that the Rockets fired D'Antoni and the place that he wants to go to is the Nets, where D'Antoni is basically the offensive coach?
Yeah.
So was it Harden they wanted D'Antoni gone, or was it the organization that wanted D'Antoni gone, and that's why James Harden is so upset? It's just very strange, because it seems like the Rockets, along the entire way, have done every single thing James Harden wanted them to do. They got Dwight Howard, and then they got Chris Paul, and then they got Russell Westbrook. They built the entire team around him, built the whole organization around him. There was no discipline ever coming his way. He was able to live his life off the court exactly how he wanted to. I'm so confused on what the situation is, and I think it just boils down to the fact that James Harden knows they're not going to be able to win this team, and it's his fault that the team's even in this situation. And I just think he wants the easy way out, just to be straight up with it.
I kind of understand it, because I don't think this team is ready to compete for a championship, and I understand why he'd want to leave, but I don't know if this is the best way to go about it, and the teams that might be in on him seems to be getting shorter and shorter every week.
And that's the news.